We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today. Good morning, welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. It is the Gibbo and Gibbo show with Steve Wraith because Supermac's having problems with his internet. We've had him on, but that's why we're slightly late in starting the programme. He's been dotting in and out. He paused at one point. He had his tongue out like this. So it wasn't the best. So with Malcolm not being on at the moment, we've got no woodpecker. We've got the duck in the background, which we've worked out comes from John's house. He says it's a clock. It sounds like a duck is trapped under his chair and he keeps going.
Well, I'm wondering, are you going to contribute anything to this menagerie, Steve? We could do with something coming from you.
I might bah. It's like old MacDonald's farm, this place. Without old MacDonald, he's gone out to shut the gates. It's been blowing a hoolie, so he's gone to shut the gates. Anyway, enough of this. It is NUFC Matters. We're here to talk about Newcastle for the next hour. Take your questions as well. If you've got any questions for John at the moment, fire them across. Got to start with the Tonali story. I've just come off the breakfast show an hour ago. I do the Northeast Footy Brekkie show, of course, on the Tune, the Cat and the Red. And Tonali's been a big talking point. My mindset on it, John, is very simple. We don't know all the facts. We don't know what the situation is. There's been a lot of stuff that's been leaked by the Italian press, stuff coming out, which is all it's all suggestion. It's all, there's nothing concrete yet. All we've got is a statement from Newcastle United to say that he's cooperating with the inquiry and that they won't be commenting any further, and they will be doing their utmost to look after Sandro and his family. That's it. That's all we'll get off Eddie tomorrow as well. I'm sure people will try and ask him a question, unless, of course, there's a verdict given. Craig Hope's gone out this morning just after 8 o'clock to say that he believes that this will get sorted out sooner rather than later. We won't have to wait too long, and that a sentence of some description will be passed. And I guess then we'll find out what exactly is going on. We know that there's been something which he shouldn't have done, but it's as simple as that, really. Until the facts come out, we can't really speak too much about it. But, there's going to be a ban of some sort, John. What do you think?
There's absolutely no question about that whatsoever. It's a very sad state of affairs. There is going to be speculation, there always is. But what we know as fact on what's coming out there is, A, that he was sent home from the Italian international squad camp, which is a very serious early indication. That outed Tonali, didn't it, in public, that there was something going on when he was sent home with the other guy, and it said it was because of the investigation and he wasn't in the right frame of mind. We've then had concrete quotes from his agent saying that he's got a gambling addiction. That's another massive step towards what will eventually come out. And then the alleged bit comes in that we know for a fact that he spoke to the prosecutors in Turin face-to-face this week, and it was alleged that he admitted then that he'd bet on AC Milan matches. Now, there's no suggestion whatsoever it was for AC Milan to lose when he was playing or anything as devious as that. It was straight betting. But that is a very serious offence if you're a footballer in any country, but in particular, it is taken more seriously than the Tony thing, even in terms of length of bans in Italy. It is absolutely 100% certain that we're facing a ban. What we don't know is how long the ban will be, and that is because if you cooperate, and all indications are that he's doing that, then the ban is significantly slashed because you've cooperated and you've agreed you've got an addiction, and you've agreed that you will not only take counselling, you will also counsel school kids about the pitfalls you can fall into. So there will be a ban. It could be as early. It's one of the guys, as you'll know, Steve, has already said yes, guilty, and he's got a 7-month ban. One of the Italian boys. So we know how quickly it can be dealt with if you're not going to deny it all and drag it out. Then you get the huge ban. So because it would appear that Sandro is not going to go down that avenue, he's going to cooperate, we will get an early decision. And it could be as early as next week. As I say, one of the Italian lads, his case is already over and he's got a 7-month ban which has started. So it will be quick. And it's an awfully sad state of affairs. There's no question that the player himself needs help, not criticism or ridicule. But at the same time as we ask for help for the player, and we do, and we're wholeheartedly with him on that, we've got to remember this is absolutely nothing of Newcastle United's doing, who have spent upwards of £55 million on the guy and could be hit with a ban of several months or up to a year. And so from Newcastle United's point of view, and legally what the implications are with the paying of the transfer fee, which was over a period of time, there's all sorts of legal complications. The fans are more concerned about what happens on the pitch, and it looks as if, I mean, the only thing, it sounds harsh, Steve, but the only thing to ask ourselves is when will we see Tonali again? Because if they can play him at the moment, they can play him on Saturday against Crystal Palace and next Wednesday against Borussia Dortmund, unless the decision is announced before next Wednesday, the decision on a possible ban. We can play him in that. But would we want to? Would he be in the right frame of mind on Saturday to start? If you start him on Saturday and he is not in the right frame of mind, and all indications are his head scrambled and is all over the place, etc., etc. What you're doing is you're inviting maybe him to have as poor a game as he had at AC Milan in the Champions League, and you're setting up a hoopla for, because everybody would be concentrating on him, the fans, the television, the press, the radio, everybody would be concentrating. And this is a match where we don't need distractions, because this is a match we must win. We're still points behind all our rivals in the Premier League table. And Crystal Palace at home is a game that you've got to win. And therefore, we don't need any distractions. And you can say we're well served in midfield for this match, because you can go with Bruno, you can go with Longstaff. In the third position can be either Joe Linton if he's fit, or Anderson. And to be truthful, Anderson, Longstaff, and Bruno have done well as a three in recent games. So you're not in too much of a mess for this immediate game on Saturday. I wouldn't risk them anywhere near the team on Saturday. I've got to be truthful, but that's just a personal opinion, built not on me criticizing or not what he's done or already prejudging him at all. But it's not fair on the boy either. He'll be all over the place. It's mentally, it's not fair on the lad. It's not fair on the rest of the team, and it would turn it into a hoopla.
Yeah, look, there's lots of comments coming in. Alan McKenzie says AC Milan knew what they were doing. The stitches up big time. There's no proof of that, Alan. We don't know yet. Hence the tears and Tonali's low-key response whilst being shown around facilities at St James's Park. His girlfriend seemed to be more excited than him. John says, in a strange way, we might all benefit from the Tonali situation with the weight lifted from his shoulders. He might show us his true worth at some point in the future. Tonali has used the tune as a safe house, says Avana Turkish, to ride out the storm in Italy. Never want to see him in a Toon shirt again. He's damaged our season and club for his own benefit. It's interesting because there's been a lot of mixed opinions on this whole Tonali situation. I can understand fans' anger, but because people feel that it's left us short. But as John's already said, we've got a lot of players, in that area who could come in and fill the gap. Joe Willock isn't too far away from being, fit again and back in contention as well, which gives us a completely different option. Somebody, of course, who was a massive player for us last season. Toonami says, now we know that Tonali's getting banned. Can you please confirm to Supermac that Tonali is not left-footed? He just keeps saying that. It's a good point. And C. Anderson says, as a minimum, Tonali's agents should encourage him to voluntarily add a year to his contract with Newcastle on the same terms and forego pay for the first year. Show contrition, Sandro, says C. Anderson. So as you can see, and his agent needs peddling, says Alan. A lot of mixed emotions coming from Newcastle fans, John, because ultimately, I guess, again, we don't really know about the full ins and outs of this, and until we do, we can't make an exact opinion on this. If it comes out that he's been gambling in Italy, he's known about it, and his agents known about it, and the club have known about it, then quite rightly we should be looking at AC Milan saying what's going on here, and we've got to play them at St James's Park in the Champions League in December. You can imagine what that's going to be like for the various set of directors coming together. However, there might be a different explanation to it. The player might have kept it from his agent. The club may not have known, and then the situation is really down to him. He's had the weight of the world on his shoulders. I've said that since he came to the club. For a 23-year-old kid, he doesn't look like he's enjoying his football, and he looks as if he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. It did look like that. He looks old before his time. No wonder he's been carrying around this around his neck, and possibly knowing that it was going to come out at some point. So, from our perspective, the other question is, did Newcastle do the due diligence? And, we've praised Dan Ashworth quite rightly for the fact that he's bringing in players who are gifted and who are good on the pitch. We also know that Eddie Howe is very protective of that dressing room and wants that dressing room to be, to be as good as it has been in the first 2 years. Was the due diligence done on Ashworth's part? Could this not have been spotted before we signed him and spent £55 million on a player that probably won't play? Lots of questions, John.
Yeah, they are. Legally, Newcastle will have the team already in overdrive on those exact points. The main points being, did AC Milan know anything of this impending investigation when they sold him to us for a very large fee? I think a record for an Italian. Did he, the player himself, know of the investigation? Because we most certainly did not. Else we wouldn't have spent 55 million on a player that was going to get a year's ban. We did not know of it. Did the club? I would suggest AC Milan will sternly say they knew not a thing, because if they admit they knew, then what they did to Newcastle is absolutely horrendous. But they will say they knew nothing of it. Did they? Did Tonali obviously knew he was gambling? But did he know that it was being investigated? Because presumably he knew it was an illegal channel that he was gambling on. So who knew what is important. And of course, Newcastle will not have paid all the 55 million up front and the whole deal's done and dusted. They pay in installments, a big lump and then installments. So do they threaten to reduce them? Do they take AC Milan to court, football court, or what do they do? All that will be looked into. The one thing they will do out of all this is stay 100% behind the player. One, because morally it's the right thing to do, and two, because they've got a player worth £55 million who's on a 5-year contract. If you cut him dead now, you've reneged on all that money, on all that protection, on getting any resale of him should he lose us, and perhaps getting twice the player when he comes back because he's so grateful for what the club's done too for him. So there's a million things to be taken into consideration. As far as due diligence is concerned, I do think it's very difficult to expect Newcastle to know whether a player is gambling secretively, because it was secretively, because it's on an illegal site. He wasn't going about bragging, but the players knew because they were doing it as well. But, expecting Newcastle to do that, it's almost like expecting Newcastle to know which wine a player drinks and whether he's slaps his missus or something. It's very difficult to know personal things unless the bloke is a rampant sort of guy, an extrovert, or a gazer who doesn't hide things and rolls with the punches. Unless you're that sort of personality, a lot of things happen that nobody would know about. So I would be a little bit concerned about pointing any finger at Newcastle United, but there's certainly questions for AC Milan and Sandro to answer regarding the transfer. It may well be the transfer was 100% on the up and up, but we've got to know. And that Newcastle just got incredibly unlucky. But we've got to know, and believe you me, Newcastle United will be working on that now. They won't be waiting until the ban's announced because they know it's coming. They will be working on now. What are we legally obligated to on this particular transfer?
Yeah, David says we all doubt that AC Milan didn't know a thing. Why else would they sell a star asset from the boyhood club that does not pass the sniff test? Why would he have left his dream team, says Toonami. The deal at the time worked well for both parties because they knew what was coming. He's been off the boil because he's been waiting for the tap. C. Anderson says it's highly unlikely that the contract between Newcastle and Milan would include clauses where the seller would warrant they knew of no issues of ongoing procedures. Mighty Mag, though, is staying positive, says he'll come back 100% loyal. We'll see the best of him when he returns. And John says, do you have any idea whether due diligence checks would have included possible betting problems? And if so, how might this happen? Or would it be virtually impossible for the club to find out? And Alan Thompson, well, he says, I know from personal experience, from someone close with me, I can tell you the people you are the last to know. Get behind the club, support Tonali, and give him support, please, everybody. We all get behind our players when he's in trouble. We just doubt the honesty of his former club, says David. As I say, this is a really, really topical, topical chat that we're going to have this morning. I think everyone's talking about it. Darren says Tonali going to be banned on full pay. That's not right. And Gary asking a rhetorical question. He just says, do any of us think he may never play for us again? If he's banned for 12 months, do we think we may quietly move him on? I mean, some newspapers are predicting it could be longer. We don't want to speculate on here because when you put stuff out on a podcast, sometimes it gets picked up and, people run with it as a fact. But, I've seen anything from 7 months to 5 years. And it's ludicrous because we don't know what he's been, what he's admitted to. We don't know what he's been judged on. So we can't give an accurate description on that. I think he'll come back better. I'm going to stick my head above the parapet, John. I think he'll serve his ban at Newcastle. I think because he's cooperated, reading between the lines, he'll probably get that 50% off, which seems to be, if you cooperate, you get like half your sentence cut, if you like. I think he'll serve his time at Newcastle because he's contracted to Newcastle, and I think he'll get the help that he needs. And I think then what we'll see is the Tonali that we bought. I think he'll come back a better player for it. He's young enough to do that, John.
Yeah, we've got to hope for that. He's certainly young enough. That is the one good thing about it, is that he's just in his early 20s, so time is on his side. I think the most intriguing question at the moment is, do we see Tonali in the short term? Because the ban may well be handed down at some stage next week, which would only give him about 2 matches he could play in the meantime, which is Crystal Palace and Borussia Dortmund. Now, if we decide that he's not in the right frame of mind to play in those, do we see him again before the ban is over? That's an interesting question for right now. You're right. We know enough to know that it's if the inevitability of the ban. There's no question that Sandro Tonali will receive a ban and will serve it as a Newcastle United player. That is 100% clear. The rest of it is murky. How long the ban will be, exactly what he's done in detail in terms of betting on AC Milan matches. You know, it was originally suggested it was just cards, etc., wasn't it? And then it become, oh dear, it's this. And then his agent said, yes, he's got a gambling addiction, which is the right thing to admit if he has, because it'll all be taken into consideration by those sitting in the seats of power that make decisions. But Newcastle United will publicly get 100% behind Tonali and stick with him through these bad times. I mean, football, if we're truthful, football as betting is nothing new. What is because footballers have too much money and too much spare time. Every afternoon off, what do? Sitting with pocketfuls of cash, will gamble because of the excitement. Not that they need the winnings, because of the excitement of do I win or do I not. And of course, you can quickly get skinned, even though how much money you have, because you put bigger bets on. But gambling in football is nothing new. Nothing new with Newcastle United players. We've had people like Barton and Chopra and Anders Townsend and Dan Gosling, and all admit to having Keith Gillespie, all admit to having a gambling problem in autobiographies they've done or newspaper articles, first person pieces they've done. The big difference is then you weren't getting player bans. You had a problem. You went to one of the clinics, whether it was Adam's clinic in London, which was started because of footballers and alcohol, and then was expanded to include things like betting. It is not new. In the old days, Stan Bowles, from Malcolm's days right away through to Paul Merson, apart from Ivan Toney, etc., it's not new in football, but it's accelerating, and it's now producing bans for those that have committed the offence. It didn't used to produce bans, and that's what's different. But football it's young men with a lot of money and too much time on their hand. Alcohol's been a problem with football in the past. Girls have been a problem. Betting's been a problem. There's always a new problem, but this is a new one in terms of affecting players' careers. It's a one that needs help, not just cast aside and you're wronging. Not at all. They don't need criticism or ridicule. They need help, and I think it will come their way. This is a new world we're living in, but it is problems that have been there before and been at Newcastle before, but they haven't produced suspensions, and that's the difference.
Yeah, I've got to be honest as well. I mean, Eddie Howe will get asked the question by Matthew Raisbeck straight away tomorrow. How Sandro, and then I think there will be probably an attempt by the national press to try and prize anything else out of him if there's been no other press releases today, of course. But the club have already said they won't be commenting any further. Tonali won't be commenting any further. As to whether Tonali plays tomorrow, I think Eddie Howe will do what he always does. He will assess the player. He'll assess how he is mentally. He'll have spoken to him. He'll assess how he is physically. He'll have trained since he came back from the hearing. And ultimately, there will be a decision made tomorrow as to whether he's in the right mental capacity and whether he's in the right physical state to be able to do anything for Newcastle tomorrow. I wouldn't personally expect Tonali to start tomorrow, Saturday, but I do feel that potentially he could be on the bench, depending on whether that suspension has come through or not. But it's a story that's changing minute to minute, hour to hour. So I just think it comes down to how he's feeling and how Eddie thinks he is.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. But the one man that'll make the decision will be Sandro Tonali himself. Eddie can't make the decision. Eddie can support him. Eddie can look at him and say, does he look right? Does he not look right? But at the end of the day, if mentally Tonali's not up to it, he would have to say, boss, my head's scrambled. I can't handle this. Now, people are different personalities. I mean, Paqueta, the mate of Bruno's, who's at West Ham,
Now he's still playing.
And playing magnificently. It hasn't affected his form. You would suspect it hasn't affected his form at all. Tony played all the way up to when he got suspended, etc., etc. But has Tonali the mental resolve to go out there and say, this is a release for me. I want to go and play football and forget about it. And I know 50,000 Geordies will be behind me. Or will he say, I'm all over the place. My mind's scrambled. I can't handle this. I'm going to go into my shell. I don't want to play. It's too tough. Because he's looked a player that's been anywhere near happy since he first come. With the first problems he had, he's been struggling with a new country, a new language, a new football philosophy. He's found all that tough. And he's gone out of the team recently when Longstaff come back in and teamed up with Bruno and all of a sudden and Anderson, and we've looked so much better balanced. And when faced with a dramatic situation, Sandro, who's more of an introvert than an extrovert, has looked as if he's got all the cares of the world on his shoulders. When he played at AC Milan, he honestly looked as if it was all too much for him. Mentally, it was all too much for him. And if that's so, then Saturday, I've got a feeling, will be all too much for him. And what I don't want to do is turn a very important match into the Sandro Tonali show. In terms of the press and in terms of the fans and in terms of the television, where everything is geared to watching him instead of everything being geared to positivity and Newcastle winning a match, which is absolutely crucial to them. And therefore, I personally wouldn't dream of starting him. But that's a personal opinion. But I honestly believe that is what will happen. I think it would be very, very difficult, apart from it being a huge gamble, unless you're the sort of personality of, say, Gaza, who rolls with the punches. And I mean this as a compliment. When he was a player, he rolled with the punches. He just loved the game so much. When he went on the field, he forgot everything else. Is that the personality of Sandro Tonali? I'm not certain that it is. And for his sake, the team's sake, and the fans' sake, in a match we've got to win, I would take him out the equation and make it a match and not the Sandro Tonali show.
No, I agree with you, John. I agree with you. I do think it'll be. I do think it'll be Eddie Howe who makes the decision, and he'll have made it. With conversation with Tonali, and we'll find out. Is he going to be like Paqueta? Is he going to be able to, to play with this hanging over him? One would imagine, though, that it is probably, unlikely. But you never know. You never know with Eddie Howe. And the breaking news, as you can see on the screen there, Newcastle United have just announced the multi-year sponsorship deal with Saudi Airlines coming on board as their airline sponsor. So something that we talked about on NUFC Matters 12 months ago that would probably happen. So nice to see that it has come to fruition. And yes, more money in the coffers, more money in the pot. Peter Silverstone, since he come in, is certainly racking up these sponsorships. So good on him. Okay, we're halfway through the show. People wondering where Malcolm is. Unfortunately, at the start of the show, we did have him here, but his internet is not lasting too well in this weather. I would imagine he's trying to reboot his computer and not being able to get back on. So we will probably have to do without him. If he comes back into the green room after these ads, I will bring him back in. But if not, join me and John after this. A big thanks to all our sponsors. Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. You can find out more about them from their website, mrvickies.co.uk, or by calling 01768 210 102. Thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And thanks to United Group Travel, UK coach holiday firm based in Morpeth. There's no strangers on their tours, just people you haven't met yet. They're now taking bookings for 2024. You can call 01670 632 460, 0791 666 4174, or 07957 141 654, or go to the website unitedgrouptravel.com. Please subscribe to the channel. Hit the subscribe button underneath the video today. We still do 7 shows a week. Hit the thumb up under the video to like it. It does us a big favour. Click share to share to your other social media and let people know about NUFC matters. We're also a podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers. If you want to help the show financially, you can take out a £25 one-off membership. You get a scarf, a pen, a cup, and a membership card. How do you get it? Go to nufcmatters.com, look for membership. If you've got a smartphone, then put your smartphone over the QR code and it will take you straight to that section on the website. We also support the food bank on this channel. You can donate to the food bank today by going to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk. We do support events on this channel as well. If you've got an event, please send it in and we'll promote it. The Tyne Theatre and Opera House are doing a Keegan, Beardsley and Waddle event, the Class of 84, 25th of January 2024. Book now by calling 0844 249 1000. And the Tyneside Irish Centre, they're doing an event with Frank Clark and John Gibson on Thursday, December the 7th. You can get tickets from nufcmatters.com and they are priced at £15. There's also some tickets available on Groupon. Don't forget, you can catch me 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, with Rye, Dave and Daz on the Northeast Footy Brekkie Show, 7 till 9. And you can catch us on the Red, the Toon and the Cat and on Toon Radio's website. WhatsApp us on the day 0330 043 2002, the perfect way to start your day. Now we've got Malcolm there. Can we hear you, Malcolm?
I hope so.
Yes, we can hear him. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
I do apologise.
Don't worry, Malcolm. Welcome back. Okay, we've talked about Tonali for the first half, and you know, just want to get your views, Malcolm, on the situation that's developed. We don't know the full ins and outs. We know that he's been helping with the inquiry within Italy, but from our perspective, we're expecting some kind of ban. The club have come out and said very little about the situation, other than they're supporting Tonali, supporting his family, and they'll be making no further comment. But it's tough, isn't it? I think, you know, we've got to sit and wait, Malcolm, really, to see what the outcome of this is before we can make a proper judgment on it.
Well, we have, but I cannot believe that Newcastle United would have signed a player with this kind of thing hanging over his head and about to erupt, and so the Italian authorities really must be questioned in terms of not letting Newcastle know what the situation was over there in that country. I'm absolutely flabbergasted that Newcastle weren't previously warned. And if they were, I can't see them going through with the deal. Can you, John?
No, you're not going to spend £55 million, which is your second highest fee in the history of the club, Malcolm, to sign a player who then can spend 1 year suspended, a full year.
Yeah, or more. Yes,
you could have more.
It could be 3 years.
Yeah, the plea bargaining, Malcolm might get it down because he is
I'm sure he is helping them, isn't he?
He is, yeah. And that'll get it down. But it's a minimum of a year. Now, you're not going to buy a player who can't play for you for a year.
Of course.
And one of the interesting things, Steve, that, you know, when we were talking in the first half about what's happening, just for me to throw in the pot, talking about, as Malcolm was, Newcastle signing a player that costs so much. When Tonali gets his ban, because I reiterate, it is absolutely inevitable that he will get it, and it'll probably be very shortly, like even next week, because he has plea bargained and said, yes, I'm guilty, but I'm willing to do this, that, and the other to help. So we could hear next week. The interesting thing, if and when the ban starts, Newcastle will have spent £161 million in the transfer market in the last window, which is the summer, on 5 players, and none of them will be first-team starters at Newcastle because Harvey Barnes is out for 3 months. Tonali will be suspended. Liverenko and Hall are only cover fullbacks, and the lad that we signed for 6 million is out on loan at Feyenoord. So we'll have spent £161 million on 5 players in the pre-season, and none of them will be first-team starters in the near future. Now, I'm not blaming the club for that because they can't control Barnes' injury and Tonali's suspension. They took a calculated gamble on buying the other 3 young players, more for tomorrow than today. But it's quite amazing to think you could spend 160 million on 5 players and none of them start.
Yeah, it's incredible, really. Jonathan Byrne, thanks for your messages. I've had gambling problems in the past. Believe me, for Sandro to get through it, he needs our support. Leave the legal stuff to the club and to their legal team, which is a good point, Jonathan. Thanks for your offer of being a mod as well.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting match when AC Milan come over to St. James Park. It's going to be very interesting. You know, do you think the board of AC Milan will come over?
Well, they're going to have to, but I can imagine the welcome, depending on how long Tonali gets banned for, could be lukewarm, to say the least. Well, Malcolm, you'll have a ringside seat to that, and Gibbo.
Yeah, you know, I think I really do feel that in the situation like this, that that a club really should inform other clubs who are showing interest in the player.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, we don't know, Milan may be completely oblivious to it. I think the feeling on Tyne side is that they probably weren't. Lots of people saying it looked a bit suspicious. Lots of people saying he hasn't looked the player that we thought he was going to be, etc., etc. But then you look back to the Aston Villa game, he was superb in that and scored a wonderful goal, got off to a dream start. But look, it's all going to come out in the wash. We'll know soon enough what he has been betting on, what he's been doing, and why he was doing it. And, you know, we want the player to get help. We want the player to play. I want the player to play for Newcastle United again. We are part of a Newcastle United family. We should support the player. He's our concern now. Let's see what he was guilty of first before we hang, draw, and quarter the guy. I think that's the message I would like to get out. Just to remind people who are just tuning in, and Malcolm, who is back, Newcastle have just announced that Saudi Airlines have become their airplane partner. So that's another multi-year sponsorship in Newcastle's bag, which will help the financial fair play no end in the transfer windows, which is fantastic. Before we look ahead to the game at the weekend, though, there was some nice early questions came in when Malcolm had dipped out about Tony Green. Just going to read them. Can Mac and Gibbo tell me how good Tony Green was? Despite only playing 33 times for Newcastle, so many people over 60 say he was the best player they've ever seen. I never saw him. I never even saw him on TV clips, says BGR. Alan says Tony Green was a magician. YouTube video of him versus Manchester United gave George Best a lesson or two in that game. I was there that game. Wow. And David John Cook says, in my opinion, Tony Green was the best player I've seen in my 55 years watching Newcastle United. And Alan McKenzie says, Tony Green was very similar in stature and style to Peter Beardsley. If we ever had them in the same 11, we would have been unbeatable. Malcolm's having a few issues again with his internet. I'll bring him back in when he's back. John, Tony Green, memories of Tony.
Fabulous. A great player. Funny, if you watched him Monday to Friday in training, you wouldn't have put him in the reserves on the Saturday because he always looked as if he was gasping for air. He was at the back of the queue when they were lapping the training ground, etc., etc. But throw a ball onto a pitch and he was transformed. He was a wonderful player with great vision. I found it very interesting, that guy that suggested he was like Peter Beardsley, because yes, in lots of ways he was. And He was phenomenal on the field. It was absolute tragedy for Newcastle United and a bigger tragedy for Tony Green that he got that injury, such a bad injury, so early in his career here. He always loved it at Newcastle. He continued to live in Blackpool, where we bought him from after he retired, etc., etc. But his heart and his great times were going to be here, and he's always staggered at how well he's remembered when he played so few games. But what was lovely as well is it doesn't always go together, as you know, Steve, that if you're a terrific footballer, you're a wonderful guy. It doesn't necessarily go hand in hand, but with him it was like that. Tony Green is an absolute gentleman, a fun man with loads of funny tales to tell, and an absolute star of a player. And he was a huge loss to the game. We've got to remember, while we mourn him and it was a huge loss to Newcastle United, we've always got to remember it's a greater loss to the player. The player loses everything. The club loses one player. So, we've got to think of Tony and how he felt with that.
Malcolm, are you there?
I am, yes. Can you hear me?
We can. You keep going in and out, so I'll monitor it. Yeah. Thoughts on Tony Green?
Greeny, what a lovely, lovely fella. Really, absolutely striking fella to be in the company of. He had a wicked sense of humour, but never took himself too seriously. And I think he was always sort of wide-eyed and quite surprised that he was doing so well in the game of football, and became so popular at Newcastle, because his playing career was quite a short one at Newcastle, bless him. And would you believe that I was literally 4 feet away from him when the injury happened? It was at Crystal Palace, and we had been up for a set piece, I think, in the Palace area, and it was cleared, and so we were all sort of chasing back towards our own half, and Greeny and I were running almost in the same in the same tiny corridor, and he was about 4 or 5 feet in front of me, just to my left, and all of a sudden there was this unbelievable crack. It was like a rifle shot, and he just went down screaming in agony, and his foot had just turned in a little divot hole, I think the injury at the time was beyond medical science, and it was such a shame, because soon afterwards I got an injury, and so I joined Tony in the treatment room, and then we got to the stage where we could go out on the track and just sort of lightly jog and what have you, and as soon as I started doing that, I started getting better and better and better, being able to do more and more and more, and bless him, Greeny just never improved. It never got any better whatsoever. And it was so sad to see such a great player having to face up to the fact that in his mid-20s that he wasn't going to play again. I always remember the first time I ever saw him. He was playing for Blackpool against West Ham in the FA Cup, and he struck a shot from about 35 plus yards, and it just flew right in the top corner. And I thought, wow, what a strike that is from a sort of, and he was quite a tiny fella, and the strike was of such wonderful timing, and I think that Joe Harvey must have been watching the same, because he suddenly swooped on Blackpool, and the next thing was bringing Tony to St James Park. And a lovely fella, great sense of humour. I love his company. Whenever he comes across, and he really does enjoy being in the company of Newcastle United supporters.
Can I just add a fun thing? Malcolm's 100% right, and he knows Tony because he shared the dressing room with him. But a fun thing about when we signed him, and Malcolm was on there about Joe swooping for him. When he signed him, part of the deal was that Bob Stoker was manager of Blackpool, who was Joe's very big friend. And part of the deal was they got Keith Dyson and we got Tony Green. Now, Joe told Dyker, get in the car, there's a transfer on the go, and you've got to be part of the talks, get in the car and I'll drive you. He wouldn't tell Dyker where he was going. Dyker's sitting in the back of the car and he's just driving. Eventually the drive, and he recognises the front at Blackpool, and he's going to a hotel, and he gets to the hotel and Joe gets out the car with him and says, right, you go in there, Bob Stokoe's waiting for you, and I'm going in here. And Joe went in one room with Tony Green, and Dyker went in the other room with Bob Stokoe. And Bob Stokoe says to Dyker, by the way, if you don't sign for us, it means the Tony Green deal's off, and you wouldn't want to face Joe Harvey if you've just messed up the Tony Green deal. So Dyker felt he was under some sort of pressure. He actually had to stay overnight because it was so late at night, overnight in Blackpool. And remember, all those years ago, this was just after the Fairs Cup, Dyker's mum and dad, and he was living at home, didn't have a phone. So he just didn't turn up at all. And they had no idea on this planet where he was, that he was in Blackpool. And he turned up embarrassed in the same gear the next afternoon and said, and mum and dad said, where you been? He says, I've been to Blackpool. They said, what? On the beach with the donkeys? What have you been to Blackpool for? And he told them, and he also said, and by the way, ma'am, I'm moving out as of now because I've signed for Blackpool. And it's the first his mum and dad knew about it. He was hijacked between Joe Harvey and Bob Stokoe. They had no phone, and he had no idea where he was going when he was sitting in the car. I don't think transfers happen like that these days.
No, definitely not. I've got to ask you quickly, John, before we look ahead to Palace, just about the message that we had in the chat there earlier. Sparky D mentions the interview that's circulating on YouTube at the minute of you alongside Doug Weatherall interviewing Cloughie and Laurie McMenemy. What was that like, John?
That's right. I mean, I forgot that was out and was being put about. Well, what it was like was wonderful because I looked a young man of some sort of limited attraction. And then I look in the mirror now and I try to see that guy, not the old decrepit guy that's actually standing here. But it was done by BBC. George House did it, who was the sidekick of Mike Neville, the very famous, you'll remember, Malcolm.
Yes, I do.
And it was on the state of Northeast football. And they got the two big Northeast managers of the time, Cloughie, who was pulling up trees all over the shop, as we know, and Laurie McMenemy, who was top manager at Southampton before he somewhat ruined his reputation by going to Sunderland and doing me a great favour by taking him to the brink of relegation. But we were interviewing the two of them on the sort of future of Northeast football, and it was wonderful because Doug is long retired, but he's still very much around with us and still very much a fan of Newcastle United and Sunderland. A lovely man who went over to Budapest with us all when we went for the 50th anniversary of winning the Fairs Cup. But Cloughie I worked on stage with Cloughie and Laurie McMenemy scores and scores of times, always separately, because, they commanded top dollar because they were top men, very different men. I mean, Cloughie either terrified you to death or smothered you in love. It just depends what day it was and how he was feeling at the time. But special men, special managers. Doug's still with us, I'm still with us, and Laurie Mack's still with us. It's amazing, isn't it? There's only Cloughie that's departed. The rest of us, I think we're all of a certain age, but we're still around. We're still breathing the air that's now scented by Newcastle United, where it used to be a bit sour. but we're still around. And the future of the Northeast football, which looked a bit limited in those days, looks quite nice now from where I'm sitting.
It does. It certainly does.
I was going to say I couldn't think of two more opposite managers than Cloughy and Laurie McMenemy.
Absolutely, Malcolm. Absolutely, two different guys. All they've got in common is they're both in the Northeast.
Yeah, I always remember Cloughy. He was being interviewed before a game one Saturday lunchtime. This is when he was managing Derby County, and he was being interviewed by David Coleman, if you remember, who used to do this the afternoon sport on a Saturday, and so David Coleman he asked the first question, and Cloughy was answering it. "Were you Derby, David?" And so on and so forth. And David Coleman looked down at his clipboard to see what the second question was, and Cloughy just stopped speaking to him, and he said, "Excuse me, David, would you mind looking at me when I'm talking to you?"
Oh yeah, I mean,
outrageous was Cloughy.
But I mean, Cloughy was subtle as an air raid, wasn't he? I mean, you got both barrels every time. But yes. I miss him at his best. He was a stupendous manager, and he did everything the wrong way around and deliberately. I mean, he stopped the team coach when Frank Clark was on it for them to have a drink in a pub on the way to Glasgow Celtic to play in Europe. He stopped the bus in a Glasgow boozer and all went in and had a half a beer on the way to a Champions League match. I mean, Clough, whatever, if the rules said A, Cloughy did B. But the wonderful thing is, he was successful doing
B. He made it work. Yeah.
Oh, he made it work
really
all the time. All the time.
Couple of announcements before we look ahead to Borough. Gibbo and Supermac are doing an evening with at the Coach and Horses in Anfield playing on Thursday, the 30th of November. The doors open at 7 for a 7:30 start. The tickets are a tenner. It's for Anfield Playing Football Club. So get in touch with the Coach and Horses in Anfield Playing if you would like to go along and see the lads. And it's a great evening. Always well worth going to watch these two legends give a talk in, and for a good cause as well. And if you're in and around Newcastle, pre-match on Saturday. I'm missing the game Saturday, sadly, working, unfortunately. But Supermac and Gibbo will be at Louis' Liquor Store this coming Saturday. 1 o'clock, free entry, children welcome. Some lovely chicken in there as well that they sell, Fed's fried chicken, absolutely wonderful. The guys will be on 1 till 1:15, and then they'll be in after the match, depending on how quickly the wind blows them down there. The big market from Gallagher. But yes, get yourself in there. It is free entry. Go and see the lads, give the pre-match and post-match chat. Always well worth going. And those of you who've been following the Tune Teasers, which has been the Newcastle United quiz that we've been doing on here, amongst a few people who regularly do the show. The last one is on tonight at 6 o'clock. Stu Penman faces the questions. I'll announce the winner of the overall competition on the Amigos tomorrow night. So look forward to that. There's the flyer for the Amigos. We will be on 5 o'clock until 7. Looking forward to getting the lads back on tomorrow night. Okay, Newcastle face Crystal Palace. Good old-fashioned 3 o'clock kickoff at St James's Park. Let's hope there's more goals and entertainment than there was in the last 3 games we had against these last season. 0-0, 0-0, 0-0. We, of course, won on penalties in the Carabao Cup. The team, a little bit early, because Eddie Howe doesn't do his press conference until tomorrow, but Anthony Gordon will be available after serving his 1-match ban. There will be no Harvey Barnes, of course, who remains out with a foot problem. We'll find out more about Tonali, I'm sure, over the course of the next 24, 48 hours as well. And there'll be news at the press conference tomorrow on the availability of Joe Willock, Alexander Isak, Joe Linton, and Sven Botman. Although I must say, Botman's social media post this week point to the fact that he's raring to go. Bruno Guimaraes is 1 booking away from earning his 5th booking of the season in a 1-match ban as well. So one to watch at the weekend. As for Crystal Palace, Eddie and Elise are both missing. There will be checks on Decore and Lerner. They might be both back for Crystal Palace. On the road so far, Palace this season, they've won 1-0 at Sheffield United and Manchester United. They've drawn at Brentford 1-1, and they got beat at Aston Villa 3-1. Referees Tim Robinson, we haven't had him since way back in 2019 when we lost 1-0 against Burnley. And VAR is Simon Hooper. So, John, how do you see it going? What's your prediction?
Well, please God, make it better than last season. 3 no draws. It's akin to watching Palace is like watching a wet weekend. It's just one step up from pulling your teeth out with a pair of pliers. I mean, the entertainers, they're not. 0-0, 0-0, and 0-0. And 2 of those 0-0s were at home, remember. In fairness to them, Hodgson has done a terrific job on limited finance of being able to put out a side that are dream killers, really. They're very, very, very difficult to play against. And you look at 3 of those results on the road this season. A 1-0 at Sheffield United, well, we won 8 there, so that's possible. But a 1-0 at Manchester United and a 1-1 draw at Brentford, they're good results. They're difficult to beat. But we go into this game unbeaten in our last 7 league and cup games, 5 wins, 2 draws. We've beaten the likes of Man City, PSG, drawn with AC Milan, drawn with Euro winners West Ham, scored 8 at Sheffield United. We're in a good run of form. The injuries is going to play a good part in who returns. If everyone was fit, I think I would go with Pope, Trippier, Shaw, Botman and Byrne, Longstaff, Bruno, Joe Linton, if he's not fit to start, Elliot Anderson, and Almir and Isaac and Gordon up front. If everybody is fit and ready to go.
Sure. Sorry, John, I was going to say, I see you've left Tonali out, and
yes, I would
agree with you.
Thanks,
His
Malcolm.
head can't be right.
No,
his head really can't be right for playing a game of football right now at this level.
Yeah, I'm pleased you agree with that. For his sake, as well as for our sake, I don't want to turn, Malcolm, the match on Saturday into the Sandro Tonali show, where
absolutely
all the press, all the television, the radio, the fans, everybody's eye on him. He has a bad game. It then affects the rest of the team. This is hard enough to beat Crystal Palace. 3-0 draws last season tells us that. We want a positive atmosphere, a positive 11 players on the pitch, and really have a go at them. We have got to win this game because we're behind in the Premier League table, and we'll have to be in the right frame of mind to play Borussia Dortmund next Wednesday. So I would not put him anywhere near our starting team tomorrow. And that is not prejudging him or being nasty about him or anything. His mind cannot be right for this. And limited training and yes, he's done a little bit, but everything points to it being a step too far Saturday, I'm afraid. And our midfield, I mean, we've got Longstaff, Bruno, Joe Linton and Anderson. We're not really short there.
What prediction did you give us, John?
Right, I'm going to say it's going to be another one with pulling your, eating your flipping nails and everything else. But and it won't be a lot of goals. Last season proved that. I'm going for Newcastle to win, but 1-0.
Okay, Malcolm.
I'm in total agreement with John. It is going to be a very, very tight game. I think Newcastle have just got that bit more goal-scoring power than they had last season, and so somebody will nick a goal. Of that, I'm pretty sure. And I totally agree with the back four that you mentioned, John. That's the one I will play, and I can't see Crystal Palace scoring. In all honesty, during the game, they are struggling for goals. And I'm going to go 1-0 on that, and it's got to be lively up front. That's for sure. If we're going to have any success of winning the game.
Great show, lads. Thanks to everybody in the chat. I'm going to go 2-0 to Newcastle. Slightly more confident. I think we'll win 2-0. But thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks to everybody who moderates as well. Really good show. Good points as well. Well made. But most of all, thanks to the two legends, Malcolm and to John. Have a great talk, lads, at the Louis Liquor Store. Sorry, I won't be there. And don't forget, you can catch the guys at Anfield playing football clubs do at the Coach and Horses Anfield playing Thursday, the 30th of October. Tickets are tenner, and you can get them direct from the pub. Thanks, lads. Take care. I'll see you next week.
Indeed. Tell our Steve. Tell our John.
Take care, boys. Bye now.